Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sollenberger. I'm excited that you and all of your parts have taken time to be with me and all of my parts. If you are a coach, a client, a therapist, if you are in business or education, and you're curious about the IFS model, you are in the right place. Now, let's see what happens on today's podcast. Hi.
Hey.
So you're in New York City.
I am, and it's kind of crazy here with the with the whole coronavirus thing.
Part of me is excited that we're going to talk about this today because I feel like it's really affecting people, and people are really scared. So tell me what you're picking up and what you're noticing. I was going to say, you just went from Texas in the middle of nowhere to New York City. So I'm guessing that's a pretty big jump for your system too.
It was a pretty big jump. What I noticed was various responses from people as I'm traveling. But really, in New York City, there's a palpable sense of fear in the air. People are suspicious of each other. If someone coughs on the subway, everyone reacts. Like, it's a big deal. There's a lot of anxiety. And I realize that a lot of our clients from around the world are going to be carrying the anxiety. So I wanted to talk a bit about how IFS therapists can work with this crisis.
That sounds great. Man, what is it like for you when you see that? Like when you experience someone coughing and someone being startled? Like what are you noticing in yourself?
Part of me has the same reaction. I look at them and am I 10 feet away from their airborne droplets? Because I've been hearing the same news everybody else has. I'm on the plane with my bleach wipes, feeling, part of me saying you're being paranoid, another part saying I don't care. I need this for my own sense of, safety as much as possible.
Yeah.
What I'm aware of is, we're all living in an unknown. There's something about the unknown which just generates more anxiety because there is no certainty. Right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. Right. So it's like, how do your parts handle the unknown in general? Like even not just with this virus, but just in general, how does your system handle when you don't know things?
Yeah, and I think it's how do we handle how do our parts handle anxiety, and then how is that different when there's an unknown? So I actually wanted to talk a little bit about that.
That sounds great. And what I'm noticing right now is I touch my face all the time, and I'm like, you're not supposed to touch your face. And even that idea brings me some anxiety. Like, you're not supposed to touch your face gives me anxiety. Like, I'm not supposed to touch my face.
Yeah. Down in Texas, we're moving into late spring, early summer. So my allergies are up. So I'm sneezing. And as we move into hay fever season, a lot of people are going to be sneezing and have runny noses and rubbing my eyes, right? Because it's all hay fever, right? Now, coronavirus doesn't have a runny nose and it doesn't have sneezing, but people are still going to react, right?
Right. Well, that's part of that, like, misinformation, right? That, like, some people don't know, or that's not the information they're getting, or they didn't see that meme on Facebook that had the 3 different, like, here's the coronavirus symptoms, here's your cold symptoms, and here's your flu symptoms, or whatever, right? So there's a lot of misinformation getting out there too.
Or they just don't remember it in the moment, right? If I'm 3 feet away from someone that sneezes close to my sandwich, all of that, the parts that have all that knowledge are going to go out the window, right? So,
well, and that's exactly what you're saying about the anxious parts, right? If my anxious parts are up, it doesn't matter if there's another part that has this information in my head. My anxious parts are going to react to that.
That's it. So let's talk for a minute about what's going to help the anxious parts. Is that okay to do?
I would love that, yeah.
Here's what I notice most commonly, right? When there's an anxious part that's up for whatever reason, it's often polarized with a reassuring part. Oh, it's going to be fine, right? We often hear that in our own psyches. But in the face of the unknown, the reassuring part cannot reassure the anxious part. There's nothing to reassure it about, right?
Yeah.
So helpful to notice, is there a reassuring part that habitually comes in? And if so, you got to catch it. Notice it's another part because it's not self, right? Another common polarized part with anxiety is a minimizing or a trivializing part. Oh, you always overreact. You're just overreacting. Well, maybe I am. And it sets up that inside, right? Another common polarity with anxiety is a reframing part. Well, what's the gift in all of this? How can we see this as a positive? Like people are flying less. That's good in terms of climate change. So again, doesn't actually help the anxious part, right?
I
And
don't know,
then,
Derek. All these parts help my anxious parts.
well, they're well intentioned. They believe that they're
Mm.
helping, right? But in terms of the anxious part, it just sets up perhaps like a temporary moment where it goes, oh, okay, thanks. And then it comes up again the moment someone sneezes. So, well-intentioned protectors, and they are doing their best. And there can be that moment of relief. Right? The last one is the reasonable part, right? Well, there's only, so many percentages and we're not in a high-risk area. And again, won't necessarily help the anxious part beyond that moment.
That is such a good point, that these protectors are really helpful in that moment, but it's temporary. I never thought about
Yeah.
it that way before.
So if we've got, and we do, if we have these protectors in our own system, it's very helpful to get clear that that's what's going on inside of us before we're working with our clients. Because otherwise, if you're my client and you say, yeah, but we're miles away from where it's really happening, my minimizing or reasonable part will collude with yours and say, oh yeah, you're right. Let's talk about what's happening at work, and we're going to move away from your anxious part.
Yeah. Right. And I like that you just said that, because I thought, right, because we're not just talking about the parts of me that are responding to it as I'm kind of going throughout my day, but it's the parts of me that are responding in the office when the client's coming in, and how am I then my part's going to collude with their parts.
So what the anxious part needs is to be witnessed, right? But witnessed by self. So in my system, and different people will have different languaging, right? But it's I get that you worry about that. I'm here. I know you're worried. And then it doesn't do anything with the worry except for it's not worried alone. It's not in isolation. It's not by itself. Right? And that provides some genuine comfort. Now, it will come up again because nothing's resolved. So each time it comes up, each time it hears a news report or a friend coughs, I get it. I hear you. I know you're worried about that. I'm with you. Right? And I will be with you. Now, the caution around that is a manager, of course, will pick up the lines, right? Oh, yeah, I get that you worry about that. I'm here. So you've got to be careful that your managers don't want to take that on, because they will not be able to provide the comfort, right? As much as self can be available, of course you're worried about that, right? What else are you worried about, right? Never hurts to ask that.
I'm loving that slight difference, because that is such a slight difference, but it feels so different in my body. That's what it is. It's like when you were first giving the list of the protector responses, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But then when you said the self is connecting and is saying, hey, I'm here, you're not alone. And I could feel the slight shift, but a big shift in my body. As you said that, I thought, wow, what a difference in my body. I can feel it. So I think it's important for people to really know what that feels like, because that can be really little, but what a big difference that makes.
It really does. I'm so glad you named that. Thanks. Yeah, so that's exactly what we're talking about. Now, to get a little more sophisticated here, well, one thing is if it's not attended to in that way, it'll just get bigger. And then the protectors will need to get bigger. So they'll have to do their reassuring, minimizing, trivializing, reframing more. And then there's just, as you said, more stress in the body, in the psyche, in the whole system. Because then the protectors are working harder to deal with the anxiety. So we can get them off the hook by just bringing more self in and thanking the protectors. They're not bad at all, right? But they don't need to take it on. And in fact, if they don't take it on, self can bring more balance, more peace inside, right? Now, that said, right, we want to also bring our curiosity, right? So if we're working with a client, this part that worries, does it need more witnessing? What does this part need from you? And helping to discern, is it a protector? Is it a protective part that's bringing the anxiety? So the usual question we ask a protector, if it didn't do this, if it didn't present with this anxiety, does it feel like a strategy? What does it imagine might happen on the inside if it didn't do this? Because it may be, even though it might sound odd that this anxiety would be a protector, but in the face of the unknown, it could be connected to a part that's experiencing helplessness, powerlessness, right? And that will track back. I mean, many of us as infants, as children, experience moments of powerlessness and helplessness in the face of the unknown. And this could be a perfect trigger for those parts.
Okay, so then it's like I'm noticing the protectors that are responding to the anxiety, and then I'm asking them to give some, I'm acknowledging them, asking them to give some space, and then being self with the anxiety, and then recognizing that that anxious part is also a protector, and then really hearing the story, or just really connecting with that part, and being curious to see what else is behind that part.
Yeah. Well, it may be a protector. It may not. It might just be a part that needs to know self is there, and I get that you worry.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
of course, we're going to worry. Look at what's happening. We don't know
Yeah.
where it's going. And people are dying. The kids are off school. Like, of course, we worry. That's just human, and that needn't be a burdened part, and it needn't be a protector. So that first intervention of "I'm here, I get it, I know you worry," going to be helpful.
Great. Okay. That's good to know. Right. So then so that's where the curiosity comes in, right? It could just be, of course, we're worried. Of course, everybody is on different levels or whatever. It makes a ton of sense. And yeah. Okay. That sounds great. Because then I'm going to go to that part with curiosity. And then if there's more there, I could follow that. I could follow that trailhead.
Yeah, and particularly if we're working as therapists with clients, right? The clients are bringing in this feels really big. So, okay, good. So let's go to, could this be a protected part? And like I said, chances are it can track to an Exile holding helplessness or powerlessness or something. So if it's a protector, of course, you want to connect with that. Now, it could also, anxiety can present as the tip of an Exile, right? And again, this is the opportunity that it's using to get our attention. So that can track to, particularly in the face of the unknown, it can track back to, I'm not safe in the world is not a safe place. And particularly any of our clients or any of us that are trauma survivors, that may be exactly where the work needs to go, right? Because at the moment, the world doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Our assumptions about safety have kind of been shattered, right? This has come out of nowhere, like, there's a part showing me the image of an arrow just shattering its world.
So for either beginner therapists or for people that are just listening in because they love IFS. Well, everyone's listening in because they love IFS. But like, what what would be? There's a part of me that has this like cynical humor about this the whole thing that's coming up. It's definitely a protector, but I can feel it wanting to make inappropriate jokes. But so, anyways, let me redirect my attention. So, what would be like a helpful question to go from the anxiety that I'm feeling to tracking an Exile? Like, what would be a helpful question to ask myself, or if I'm a therapist, to ask a client?
Okay, good. Thank you. So notice the anxious part, right? So of course, as always, if you're working with a client or even with yourself, notice how you feel towards it. Are you open to it? Are you curious about it? It definitely has a story to tell you, right? Whether it's just about present day or whether it goes back a ways. So if you're tuning in, hey, I'm really frightened. I don't feel safe. Okay, I've got you. Do you know I'm here? Do you know that it's me? In my system, I'm 57, right? I've got you. And I hear that you're frightened. I really hear that. So tell me, how long have you been around? How long have you been carrying this kind of fear, right? And if it's present day, coronavirus, great. But if it's, a long time, then you're probably tracking back to the kid part, right? And you want to bring all of your compassion to the kid part. What's happening, right? When did you start out holding this? What's going on, right? And it could be a part that's being bullied in school. I have a part, I grew up in the British school system, which, whatever you've heard about it in North America, I would get kicked repeatedly at one point because it was funny for the boys to kick the other boys on the ground. So there's a part, I can feel it right now, is when I tracked to I'm not safe, it wasn't safe. Right? The teachers were ignoring it. It was just boys being boys back in the day. And for that part, when it's 12, 13 years old in its school uniform, I can see it right now. It's not safe. And if I can let it know, I get that it's not safe. Now, in this case, I want to update that part. I want to make sure it knows it's 2020. I'm here. We can do a retrieval. In the internal world, as you know, we can get that part out of where it's stuck, take it somewhere else internally where it feels safe. That's not wishful thinking. That's actually shifting according to what Dick Schwartz calls the laws of internal physics, right? We can do that. So we can provide that kind of intervention, that kind of relief.
Beautiful. And so, thank you for using a personal example, though. I love that. I think it really helps. It just feels connected. And so, for people that don't know, just to give them words around the retrieval, how do you like to say that?
Thanks. So if I'm listening into that one, I'm like, okay, it actually just happened very rapidly in my system. I've got a quick system, but I'm listening in. It's like, okay, you're there, you're frightened. The bell's about to go for class. The bullies are there, right? And they're gonna
Yeah.
pick on you, and the leader's looking at you. Let's get you out of there, right? Let's
Yeah.
get you out of there. I'm here with you. I can get you out of there. And you, all grown up, where would you like to go? Right? Would you like to come into the present with me? Would you like to tuck yourself into my heart? Would you like to go to a park? Would you like to go somewhere where you do feel safe,
Yeah.
right? Wherever that might be. And then stay with this part until he shifts into the place where he can take a breath because he's no longer in the threatening environment. Right? Now,
That's great.
therapeutically, there may be more he needs to let me know, in which case I'm open to that. There may not. That might be the only intervention he needs.
Right.
And if you're in that new place, do you want to be there with someone? Do you want other parts to hang out with you? Would you like a puppy? What's going to make you feel better? And the key thing here is he knows he matters to me. He knows I love him. There's no judgment. I've got other parts that could happily judge him. Why don't you stand up for yourself? Blah, blah, blah. Whatever.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm not holding those judgments. And with that love that I feel for him, he can be somewhere and feel safe, probably for the first time. Then when I go back to the coronavirus, there's a different energy around it, right? I don't have the same alert going on because some of that alert's been informed by these exiles, right? And some of it isn't. It's still scary. It's still like what's going to happen and what's going to happen in the economy. Will I be able to continue to be a therapist? What if clients decide they have no money and therapy is a luxury? I can hear all that, rather the legitimate concerns, present day, but they don't come with the exile panic anymore.
Yes.
Right?
I love that you just did that because I think oftentimes we stop with we retrieve that exile out and they go to a happier place or a safe place. And then I think it's important to be like, okay, let's think about the triggering event and see how that feels differently in our
Right.
system.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, because that's how we know the shift has taken place, right? There's a felt sense of a different response. I think there's a bigger piece here. I do think there's a bigger piece here. We're not looking at business as usual these days, right? We're looking at climate collapse. We're looking at this virus. So our assumptive world, what we've been raised to believe in and how we project into the future is shifting. It's just shifting. And it's no longer, we can no longer rely on the certainties that our parents, many of them, that we relied on. So I think there's a way in which we need to be open to the new, open to the parts that grieve that grieve the safety and the predictability. The more we can open to them, really hear them, I think the more we can be present to the shifts without panic buying, without clearing the shelves, because there seems to be an assumption that a respiratory virus means that I'm going to shit 20 times a day, and I'm not getting that connection personally, but it seems to be there, right? So the less we're going to come from those panicky places, the more we can. It's not going to help my neighbor if I've got 40 days worth of beans and they've got no food and they're isolating for 14 days. Right?
That's right.
What is going to help them is if I knock on the door and I say, I haven't seen you for 4 days. How you doing? Do you want me to get groceries for you? Do you want a bowl of chili?
And some toilet paper. Bring you some beans and toilet paper.
Yeah, I mean, that's connection, that's community, that's compassion. That's what's going to help us. That's a self-led response.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing is if we're all in panic, then, and understandably, without judgment, we're gonna hoard the beans and toilet paper. If we're operating from those parts, that's of course what we're going to do. So if we can be more in self no matter what happens. But it's like my son goes to a private school, so right now our schools are okay, but I'm assuming in this next week that that's all going to change. I mean, so much has changed this past week, but there is this comfort in knowing that if I'm self-led, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. My neighbor's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. We're going to figure it out. And if I'm leading from this anxious place that does the same thing that you did, is like, okay, well, if I can't work and people don't come, then I don't have any money, and maybe I shouldn't eat any of the beans. We shouldn't eat any of the food that we have. Sort of that there's going to be a completely different response inside of me. It's going to spread to my neighbors and to my friends, and And we don't want, like you're saying, we don't want to live in what you're seeing in New York. Like we don't want to live like that.
Yeah, and there's a way in which those parts can almost be catching. You know, if you look at someone and they're alarmed, and then you look around and someone else is alarmed, and someone else is, you know, it could. As I imagine that, I can feel the tension in my own body. Whereas if I look at someone who's calm, helps me calm. So the more we can do this, especially those of us that are therapists with our clients, attend to our own parts going in. So when they come in high distress, we don't need to mirror it. We don't need to collude with their protectors. We've done our own work enough to say, yeah, does that part know you're there?
Derek, that's great. Thank you for meeting with me today.
Thanks for being available.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you like this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time. Today's episode was sponsored by Brighter Vision. What's the point of having a beautiful website if it doesn't attract the clients you want to see? As the worldwide leaders of website design for therapists, Brighter Vision sees this issue happen way too often. A nice-looking website doesn't equate to a successful website. The truth is, your current website might even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of website designers will create a website that is centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client so that you can have a nice-looking website as well as a successful one. Better yet, Brighter Vision is offering $100 off exclusively for listeners of the One Inside podcast. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/inside. Again, that's brightervision.com/inside.